A challenging climate, strange days, unprecedented times. However we choose to describe it, there is no doubt that the coronavirus has brought upheaval and disruption to global society on a level that many of us have never experienced before. While there's much talk of the pandemic being a great leveller due to its holistic impact on day-to-day life, the truth is far more complex, with individuals, businesses and organisations feeling the effects of the coronavirus in a variety of different ways. The new normal aims to give these people an opportunity to tell their stories, assess the potential impacts of the pandemic on their lives and careers, as well as exploring the challenges and opportunities that have arisen from this era-defining situation. Each week, myself, Chris Webb and Helen Armitage from the Careers and Employability Service at Sheffield Hallam University will be joined by a different guest from the world of industry, educational careers, with opportunities for listeners to put their questions forward in advance of the podcast. Thanks for tuning in and joining us as we explore what the new normal means for all of us on a local, national and global scale. Good morning and welcome to episode 10 of The New Normal. I'm joined as always by my co-host Helen Armitage. Helen, how are you doing today?
Very well today, Chris, very well. Still recovering from sunburn. So with this glorious weather we've been having, I'm still covered in aloe vera. My fair skin and red hair don't do too well, but no, good today. I would say about a 6 out of 10.
Lovely. Yeah, I think probably have to put myself roughly in the same category. Again, suffering from the same sunburn woes, but I suppose it's good to know that Brits Abroad continues even when everybody can't.
Absolutely, yeah.
Always a positive. And with the AGCAS Alternative Conference just around the corner, we thought what better a time today to focus an episode entirely on HE career services and some of the innovations and changes that are taking place within the sector at the moment. So we're delighted today to be joined by not one, not two, but three individuals from the sector, all with very varied experience and lots of different insights to share. So first up, we have Matthew Howard, who's Careers Manager at Lancaster University Management School and a member of the AGCAS Employer Engagement Task Group. Matt, good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Chris and Helen. Thank you. And like you as well, I've also got sunburn. It's very rare that we get such good weather in Lancashire, so I've been making the most of that on my lunch breaks. Yeah, but nice to be here. Thank you.
Fantastic. We also have with us Becci Hubbard, who's Careers Consultant Team Manager at Nottingham Trent University and Co-Chair of the AGCAS Curriculum Design Task Group. Becci, very good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me on.
No problem. Thank you for joining us. And finally, last but not least, we have Claire Guy, Employability and Careers Consultant within the Postgraduate Business School at the University of Exeter, member of the AGCAS Academic Alignment Working Party and Co-Chair of the AGCAS Curriculum Design Task Group.
Hello.
Good morning to you.
And obviously it's always sunny in Devon, so we just have constant suntans all year round. The sun never stops shining down here.
I feel like probably when this episode goes out, we're going to regret all this talk of the good weather with the turn ahead, but I think useful to mention it while it's here, definitely. As always, before we kind of kick things off, we like to start each episode with our Gloombusters for the week, our good news stories. So Matt, if I can start with you, any good news stories you'd like to share with us this week?
Yeah, definitely. I think myself and Helen were talking just before the podcast. I think one story that definitely caught our eye and inspired us, and as I'm sure many listeners as well, was the SpaceX launch over the weekend. And you know, as a lifelong sort of Trekkie and sort of Star Wars fan, I love all kind of space stuff. This really, caught my imagination. The first commercial operator to carry astronauts into space in partnership with NASA. So I was really inspired by that. And I definitely think it, all of us looking up, it gives us inspiration to the future, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it captured me this weekend. I was on NASA, live there for liftoff. I was counting down and then followed it when they docked at the International Space Station as well, and then waiting for when they could come out. It was just brilliant. And I think, current COVID-19 times and then other issues that are happening around the world with the riots over in America as well. I think the positive story of that, which is so monumental, it really kind of captured me this weekend, and I'm still following it now. So yeah, really positive story.
Yeah, it's amazing that we even suspended our weekly quiz for it. So, I mean, it really was kind of dominating the the discourse all over Zoom. Becci, I believe you've got a good news story you'd like to share with us as well.
Mine's a very British one of just how amazing the weather's been recently. And I know this probably won't age very well when people are listening and the weather might have turned a bit. But for me, with a young, excitable toddler at home, to be able to get the paddling pool out. And I must confess that we have sat in the paddling pool when she's had a nap as well and enjoyed it for ourselves too. It's been fantastic. So yeah, I think that's just made the whole situation, particularly for people with children at home, just so much easier being able to get out in the sunshine.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, people have been talking about what it might have been like had the pandemic happened sort of in October and how different it might have been, and May being the hottest month, UK month on record. So I think there are some blessings to be counted alongside all the stuff that perhaps has been a lot more challenging. And a final good news story, I guess, from me. I'm not sure if anybody tuned into the Hay Literature Festival that was completely online last week. There was a really, really good talk from Daniel Susskind about the sort of future of work and automation. And some interesting reflections that came out of it, particularly around that actually jobs for women being less at risk from some of the analysis that's been done than jobs for men. And that's kind of been contrary, I think, to some of the stuff that has been put out previously. But some really interesting discussions there and around sort of gainful unemployment, what could happen, if automation does remove a lot of the kind of routine jobs and non-routine jobs that people do. So I think that's still available to access maybe over the next week, but I'm sure someone has got a kind of pirate on YouTube somewhere. So well worth watching if you get the chance.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, we'll kick off now then. So if we can just start with you guys telling us how COVID-19 is affecting your work life and personal life, and kind of how you're adapting to the current climate. So I'll come to yourself, Claire, first.
Yeah, so my story is probably a little bit of a unique one in that I actually just recently, well, I say recently, it was quite a while ago now, but I haven't been in my current job for very long, and I actually started on the day before lockdown. So March 16th was my first day in my new job, and that promptly that evening was told not to come back onto campus for the foreseeable future. So it's been a really interesting kind of experience trying to get to grips with a new job, but doing that from home. And luckily, my new role is very much a kind of project work. So I'm designing a piece of online learning and creating lots of new kind of workshops and things that were designed to be online anyway. So, this whole kind of COVID-19 and pressure to move things online and a kind of sudden clarity, I suppose, about all of the different apps and different tools that we can use in our delivery, really kind of being quite creative in using technology in new ways, and kind of combining that with some of the work that I've done as part of the curriculum design group. I've actually found working from home really great because I've been able to just kind of sit and concentrate on those things. So, learning to edit sound clips and pasting pieces of videos together and recording myself talking about things. I've got used to looking at myself from almost every angle. I've become quite comfortable with it now. I've got over the kind of weirdness of hearing my own voice. So it's been a really interesting learning curve, which I've actually been really enjoying. So without the distractions of listening to someone in the office telling me about how their washing machine broke down or whatever else might be kind of the weekend update. So for me, it's been a real time of kind of intense working, lots of learning and quite a lot of creativity. So for me, it's a big thumbs up.
Yeah, no, really interesting. I think that, like you mentioned the word clarity there, that's not been spoken about quite a lot, but I think it's definitely something that I can certainly resonate with, and I think other people that I've spoken to as well, that you haven't got those distractions as you would have in the office. Not necessarily that they're bad distractions, but with yourself being at home, you have got that sense of clarity there. So, and you can just crack on, no distractions, if you're in that situation. So yeah, really interesting, really interesting. Is that something yourself, Matthew, you kind of relate to about your time at home and how it's kind of affecting you and working?
Yeah, definitely. I think obviously working from home has had its challenges, and certainly at Lancaster, there's been a few technical things here and there we've had to overcome in terms of how we operate our service. But I've kind of taken this as a time to remain positive, and certainly myself in my own situation, you know, I've managed to sort of get away without having a 1 hour commute to work and a 1 hour commute back. So I've saved all that time. And, you know, although at the beginning it was weird and strange adjusting to this new way of working, I had worked at home previously kind of ad hoc, and settling into it has been a positive for me, I think. And using those 10 hours more productively, so, you know, getting out there to do running outside of work has always been a really positive thing for me as well. And again, we've been blessed with the weather, I think, on the most part throughout this period of time. In terms of the service as well, I honestly really admire Claire for starting a role virtually. And myself, have had a new starter who started his role a week into lockdown. And, you know, it's so strange having someone joining the service, brand new to the service, who's never met anyone before, except for in an interview, actually starting an internship. So, you know, really admire Claire for doing that. I think I've been fortunate that, you know, over a number of years, I've managed to build some strong relationships with colleagues. So, you know, much of the conversations that we've been having over the last couple of years have just moved online. We've tried to keep as a team as much as possible, you know, online coffee catch-ups and, you know, birthday celebrations and all the things you'd expect from the office, tried to move that online. But certainly feeling a lot more productive. You know, you don't have the same distractions. You do have more time to think. And, you know, you do have more time to reflect, I guess, throughout the day as well. So, yeah, it's been positive, I think, in quite a lot of ways.
Brilliant. Okay. And Becci, how about yourself? I understand you've got a very small person as a distraction at your house.
Yes, there's certainly a few distractions having a nearly 2-year-old accompany when you're working. So just for a bit of balance, I guess it's been there is a lot of challenges for people that have got families at home or caring responsibilities at home and have, you know, I think really as a manager, what I'm learning through this as well is, you know, everybody's got their own story, everybody's got their own stuff going on alongside work. So everybody's having to balance one thing or another alongside their work at the moment as well. So I think initially it's taken a while to kind of figure out a routine of who looks after the child when, how we balance that, how we entertain a child whilst we can work at the same time. But I think it helps, you know, the team have been brilliant, the management have been extremely supportive, and I think, you know, for a lot of my colleagues, they're like, bring your child onto the phone, it's lovely to see her, and really kind of embracing the fact that our work and our home lives are a little bit more blurred than they were before. So yeah, it's been, in terms of the service, it's been incredibly busy, a lot of troubleshooting to be done, upskilling the team, but some of the bonuses from that is that we're a big team. We're split over 4 campuses. So I've seen my colleagues more than I would have done in the office, and we actually talk more than we would have done. And I check in with the people that I manage more often than we would have done had we been in the office environment. So that has been a real positive to take away from it.
Really interesting. Huge teams, a lot of management issues, and like you say, trying to find out everybody's story and everyone's circumstances. It's can certainly echo that, and I think, and probably Chris will say the same, we've probably never been busier, really. It doesn't seem like there's been a lull at all, and I don't think there will be a lull as we continue throughout the summer and going into semester 1. So thank you all, that's been really interesting. So moving on to the first kind of discussion topic that we've got here then. We've all kind of said that it's a very busy time for us in our careers roles within higher education at the moment, and careers and employability departments in general within institutions all up and down the country. So what do you think are the key focus points that careers and employability departments should be doing to adapt their services to the COVID-19 world, and then as we go forward into the post-COVID-19 world?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think for me, a lot of it is about the technologies that we're having to use. You know, I think every service in the country has done a phenomenal job of moving everything really quickly into an online space. And whilst we were, you know, I think we were all doing that to varying degrees before, we've kind of had to be really creative about you know, some things which feel easier to move to a virtual space than others. And you know, I guess to me it just feels like a really good opportunity to be more creative, to kind of re-evaluate how and why we do things, and you know, not to just lift not to just kind of make something exactly the same, a kind of intervention, but just online. It's kind of a chance to really think about our sticking points in our industry. So things like student engagement, is there ways that we can use a virtual environment to tackle our issues rather than just transfer them from one medium to another? And I think that there's a lot of challenges, like Becci just said. There are a lot of challenges in that, staff have variable levels of competency, enthusiasm, fear about technology, but also I think we really need to be very careful not to fall into a trap of assuming that students and graduates feel comfortable in an online space. I think the phrase digital natives is used far too liberally, and my experience of working with students in two quite different institutions, one where social mobility is a real kind of issue, lots of very rural students with low social capital and all of those kind of other issues, and another kind of Russell Group university where perhaps we would expect students to be a little more capable. I think in both of those environments, you can be surprised at how uncomfortable students can be online, so maybe they can use Instagram or whatever, but that doesn't mean that they can use Teams, or that they feel comfortable talking up in a Zoom meeting, or that they will be happy and comfortable to talk to an employer in a virtual space. So I think there's some upskilling everywhere to do, and for us to just be mindful that this is a new and kind of new territory for everybody, really.
I think it's really interesting to hear that, Claire, because it kind of takes me back to a presentation I saw Tristram Hooley give a couple of years ago about generational theory. And I read an article about, Gen Z saying, tech savvy, digital natives, entrepreneurial, referring to kind of school age students. And my experience working in schools at the time as a careers leader was, who have you been speaking to? So I think, really, really interesting to hear that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's an interesting point. I do agree that there needs to be a level of upskilling across services at the moment to adapt to this current way, but it's also not to forget the ways that we've used in the past, the methods that have worked well. I think there does need to be quite a mix there, to reach out to all students, to adapt to all student needs, but to move forward into this new way of living there as well. Yeah. Matthew, have you got any interesting insights of what you think Careers and Employability Department should be doing to adapt at the moment?
Yeah, I think definitely building on from what Claire said, I think now's the time to pause and reflect as much as anything else, especially as we're looking towards the autumn term and 2021, just to think about what we have offered throughout this whole year, face-to-face and online, what has worked, what hasn't worked, and how we can possibly take a service fully online or make it more blended, I guess, if we can. I do really think it's important to think about accessibility and how students can access the service, and definitely Claire mentioning around social mobility. Do all students have access to the technology that enables them to not just study online, but also to access our service online? So digital poverty, I think, is a really important thing to consider. Another key thing that definitely takes up a lot of my planning time working at Lancaster University is we do have a high proportion of international students currently. And how do we provide a service to students who, I guess, in theory, are all around the world now? So, possibly 8 hours ahead in China, or 8 hours behind, or whatever it is. How do we offer that service, and how do we be present for students who are not necessarily in our same time zone? So we are considering ways that we can offer lots of live sessions and appointments and workshops and webinars, but we're also looking to adapt the service around those specific needs as well. And none of us fully know what's going to happen, I guess, looking into autumn term, and I know that not all universities have yet made a decision around whether we're going to be face-to-face teaching or blended or online learning. But we're definitely having to reflect and to adapt as much as possible. But I do think it's also important to ensure a very personalised service, and certainly I think ensuring that we are not just sort of ploughing ahead with a digital model that doesn't necessarily cater for all student needs. I think that's really important.
I just wanted to say really quickly on this point. So we've said about the student very much being at kind of the centre of this and thinking about accessibility and international, but we've got to think for all students, what is their full holistic university experience like? And we could move everything online to Zoom or Teams or using different technology, but if every single thing they do throughout their course is using the same technology and the same style, how are we going to prevent the kind of digital fatigue for those students? So it goes back to Claire's point about let's not just replicate, we had an hour-long session book, so we're going to do an hour-long session. Actually, how can we get to the core of the learning that we want to take place with those students in an accessible way that's also perhaps not just the same as everything that they're getting everywhere else too?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really important point. And you've all mentioned, aspects of personalisation. I think that's what we would have been doing anyway, but as you say, now in quite a different context. And I think that a lot of the articles we've seen over the past week or so about the kind of value of HE, it's become an even more important discussion, I think. So really interesting to hear that reflected from all of you. As you've mentioned, all universities and the sector as a whole is really kind of adapting to the current climate and seeing, how things might look come the autumn. And I guess pivoting their business models as other businesses are to kind of adapt to the demand and what's changing. Now, this week, we've actually launched at Hallam our kind of Class of 2020 support programme, but we have talked about that a little bit on another podcast. So we don't want to dominate too much airtime, being seen as being too partial one way or another. So we thought it'd be a nice chance to kind of find out if you can share any examples of projects that you're currently working on with the current Class of 2020 at your own institutions, or any other projects indeed that are supporting students from particular backgrounds or particular parts of their degree across the university. Becci, would you be happy to start us off on this one?
Yeah, absolutely. So at Nottingham Trent University, for the last few years, we've had quite a comprehensive graduate support offer. So what we do at our university is called Future You, and we ask final year students to sign up for the Future You, so that essentially we can keep in touch with them once they leave. So they can indicate on that form about what their career needs are, what their job preferences are, where they're likely to be based, so that we can offer tailored support before and after they graduate or they finish their course. So, and this year it's more important than ever to be kind of collecting that information and encouraging students to keep in touch with us, really. So from that, we're in the middle at the moment. We do a phone call campaign to our final year students that are either signed up already or not signed up, to really just check in and see how they're getting on. Do they need any support? It's not a heavy going, what are you doing next after university? It's just to remind them that we're here, and our kind of main message is that they don't have to go it alone. So I've worked in kind of the graduate space for quite a few years now, and I've really felt this from a lot of graduates. I'm going to go off and try it on my own, and I'll come back to you when it's a crisis or I've given up. And what we're really trying to encourage students to do, and graduates, as I'm sure every university is to just work with us as you go through. Don't wait till a crisis point to get in touch with us. So we offer all the usual things. We do graduate coaching, we send personalised job alerts, we have online programmes, and we also have an internship scheme as well that we're looking at the moment about how do we offer this virtually, and what does the working environment look like for these graduates as well. And we've also got quite a strong focus on graduate wellbeing, as I'm sure other universities are in the same position, where graduates can access the employability service or the career service, but they can't access the student support side of things. So I think anybody working in that graduate space needs to have good links with local organisations that you can refer to, good links and useful information, and also be ready to have those kind of conversations with their graduates as well, because I think once they've graduated, it's more of a reality, whereas whilst they're a student, it's kind of thinking ahead and what ifs and planning, whereas as a graduate, you do find some graduates do struggle more with mental health and well-being, and also just kind of motivation, really. And then the good thing about this environment is it's so much easier for graduates to keep in touch. They can join in on all our virtual events and fairs, and without having to go anywhere. So in some ways, they're going to have access this year to more support in an easier format than they would have done kind of in previous years.
Yeah, I think that's a really valuable point, Becci, particularly around the student wellbeing. And we actually had a session last week with our wellbeing team that some of the employability advisors attended, and it was really interesting to see where a lot of the crossover is, and perhaps how much more work we could do together moving forward, and perhaps what hasn't been done in the past. So I think, pandemics as many people have noted, presented us with a lot of opportunities for kind of collaborative working, which is great moving forward. Claire, anything you'd like to add on this front as well?
Yeah, I mean, we at Exeter, we've just introduced something called Careers Forever, so kind of similar to what Becci was talking about, really, just an extended offer of support to our graduates indefinitely, so they can access nearly all of the support that we give to our current students for as long as they need it, kind of wherever they are in the world. And as Becci said, it's much easier to do that when things are online. And I guess we've been introducing some things that are new to us because they reflect the situation that we're in at the moment. So things like being aware of job scams online, or thinking about all of the paid for graduate services that there are out there, and how do you decide what's good quality or not. Ideally, it makes sense to me to use a free qualified service from your own university, but of course, students, for whatever reason, sometimes choose not to. So I think there's new aspects of kind of the graduate space that we have to help students to understand, and it's a really good opportunity for us to build our kind of credibility as experts as well, because if you think about it, if you're a graduate now, your mum and dad aren't going to be able to help you with how to do a virtual assessment centre. Not even your big brother or big sister or your cousin, they're not going to know either. So, kind of helping people to navigate this space at the moment, we really are the experts, and I think that's a really good opportunity for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think a really important point there as well around kind of the range of information that's out there. I was talking to a student the other day about micro-credentialism and something on FutureLearn he'd found, sort of 15 credits. Could they use that for, a data analytics job? And it's a complex picture, isn't it? We can kind of pick up these credentials, but not necessarily sure where you kind of can use them, who to go to talk about that. So as you say, Claire, totally agree. Using the free services that are there, particularly if you've got that extended guarantee as a graduate, really, really useful. Matt, anything you'd like to add on this front regarding what's happening at Lancaster?
Yeah, definitely. I think, obviously, building on everything that Becci and Claire have said, the picture is very similar at Lancaster in terms of the support that we're offering. But I think, behind all that and underpinning all that is a message that it's not you, but it's the pandemic. It's the situation that we find ourselves in. So, lots of positive messages and definitely a huge focus, even more so than before, on individual coaching with students. I don't think I've ever had as many one-to-ones, to be honest, especially not online as well. So, you are really, getting to the core of what students are feeling and how you can support them moving forward. And to be honest, that as much as the conversations have been quite difficult with, graduates having lost offers and placement students having to, go to a plan B, it has, as a careers professional, been really rewarding that you can be part of that experience with the student. You can help them and coach them a little bit more. We also do, just to plug it, we do have another podcast at Lancaster called Get That Grad Job. And there is a heavy focus on final years and recent graduates in terms of the transition from being on campus to being in whatever kind of industry they find themselves in. We are offering lots of workshops, obviously lots of webinar sessions. The sessions that we're running are filling up as quickly as we can put them online. Engagement has been really high. Recent sessions that we've had around LinkedIn, for example, had around about 400 students sign up, which is, I've never had that before. And, as much as there have been sort of positives and negatives to adapting to an online service, having Teams and Zoom and other platforms means that we can scale up some of the sessions that we would have previously done. So heavy focus on sort of coaching, but also I guess how we can scale up some of that support to students is also been a big focus.
I think that's really interesting, that everyone's got these kind of initiatives and programs that are there to support the graduating class of 2020. I'm quite curious to know if it's yourself that is just the only ones that's pushing this, or are you getting buy-in from academic teams? as well, and how much useful our academic kind of brothers and sisters are being in promoting these schemes as well. Becci, is that something that you're having, you've got those links within courses and departments that are helping drive this initiative?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're looking at Nottingham Trent. We have a school employability manager that kind of half sits in the academic school and half sits in our team. And they're kind of responsible for coordinating all things employability within the school. And they really help get academics on board with this, because I think it's such a strong message when it comes from their tutor or an academic member of staff that the students are used to working with, that us as a university are here to support them with their next step. So we really do try and work with our academic colleagues for them to share that message.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I just, from personal experience, the connections that I have with academics in different courses and different departments, it's just a godsend, really, to have that positive relationship there with them, and it makes the job so much easier. Like I say, when you've got a positive influence that the student is seeing on a daily basis, it makes the job so much easier, not just for this year's class of 2020 that are going forward, who really need all support possible, but for our level 4 and level 5 students as well. Okay, so linking closely to that discussion then, do you think that the current climate and future COVID-19 world will change how careers departments are utilised and worked with across universities for all our different academic levels, in terms of working with academic departments and other internal teams, and of course students and graduates? So Claire, I'll come to you to answer this one.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the way I kind of see the future unfolding is that, at least in the short term, that our colleagues across universities are going to be so busy, trying to completely revamp their own curriculums, trying to reimagine what their kind of teaching would look like, trying to teach potentially smaller groups, more of them, and I really believe in kind of collaboration with other parts of the university. So I guess it's thinking about how can we complement what each other are doing, rather than all trying to replicate the same stuff. So I guess what I imagine is that even those very engaged academics who have had their finger on the pulse to do with professions and the labour market and what's going on out there for graduates, they just, at least in the short term, won't really be able to keep on top of that. So I think, we're going to have a really critical and important role to play in keeping not only students and graduates, but our university partners, academics, course leaders, programme designers, in thinking about what's happening in the labour market, what professions are kind of growing, changing, shrinking, what areas are being most affected. Because I really do think that we're going to see some significant professional restructuring that probably none of us have seen in our careers before. So we're going to have an awful lot to keep on top of, and I think our colleagues in universities are going to be wanting to hear from us about what we know and what we can see happening out there.
Absolutely. And Matthew, do you envisage something similar happening at Lancaster as well?
Yeah, definitely. As Claire mentioned, I think we've possibly got a couple of months and longer of lots of uncertainty and challenges for the HE sector more generally. Challenges around recruitment, challenges around course design, and I do think that career services, as well as other professional services, do need to work really closely with academics. We're very fortunate at Lancaster that we have very strong established relationships already. We have academic employability champions that kind of champion employability within their own departments. And just before I came onto the podcast, I had a quick look to see how many modules this year we've been working on with academic colleagues in the management school. And there's 21 modules this year that we've input into or sort of run on our own in collaboration with academics. And I'd like to see that continue. I do think that industry focus of particularly business school is really, really important, that we have that collaboration between careers professionals and academics. Yeah, so I'm hoping it will only strengthen that collaboration. And hopefully help us both recognise that we're all working towards the same goals, and we all want our students to have really meaningful experiences, really positive experiences at university, and to leave happy students who've managed to secure some fantastic jobs.
That's great. Thank you, guys. all of us who've been kind of involved in that collaborative academics, which may be going on, as you said, to a greater extent at some universities, but obviously is going to become even more important moving forward. We've obviously talked quite a lot there about, I suppose, that involvement between kind of universities and university staff and kind of keeping things very much within the university sector. But I suppose one thing we haven't talked about too much at the moment is employer engagement. And Matt, I know that you're involved with the employer engagement task group with AGCAS. And so we thought it might be quite useful to kind of talk a little bit about some of the research that came out of the ISE AGCAS joint report recently in terms of this idea of career services leading the way on kind of future employer engagement activity, and particularly this expression of oven-ready solutions, things that can really help employers know how to reach out and know how to engage with universities. How do you feel this might sort of impact on career services moving forward? And are there sort of examples you think services have already, or is it something that's going to take quite a lot of creative thinking to work their way around?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question, Chris. And a couple of weeks ago, myself and other members of the Employer Engagement Task Group at AGCAS held a forum with around about 80 professionals from across the sector to discuss this very thing. And, you know, there's so many good practices coming out of different universities. But the thing I'd kind of say straight away is that obviously each institution is a different point in time in terms of their development of employer engagement that's online, the resources that are available to them, their student groups. So institutional context is really, really important. But certainly myself and the task group have found that, you know, universities are looking to develop these, as it was called by Gabby Binney, I think, at ICAS, oven-ready solutions. I like the idea of this cake that we're all building, all sort of baking together. I do think when it comes to employer engagement, a lot of what we need to consider is how possibly we reimagine some of the activity that we had on campus. And again, thinking back to previous discussions in this podcast, you know, what are the best bits of that we could possibly take online? Which bits are going to be more challenging? And one of the key themes that came out of the forum a few weeks ago was scalability. So, you know, the challenge of how can you take a careers fair and move that online? Some universities obviously have got are in a position to be able to work with suppliers and to have resource behind them to build platforms, but some universities again are not able to do that. So scalability is definitely something to think about, as well as, I guess, the different types of interactions we might have with an employer. And, you know, we're guilty, I guess, within employer engagement sometimes to consider the careers fair or the webinar as one of the main ways of engaging with an employer. But particularly, I guess, experiential learning, so placements and internships and lots of other types of activity that we could work with employers on. And I really think that when it comes to these oven-ready solutions, I think we need to kind of look towards that experiential learning side of things. How can we make some really fantastic consultancy experiences with, you know, smaller organizations or large organizations? How can we support students who want to do a year in industry working with employers in really creative ways? And I think that's really where we can come into our own. I think one of the greatest things that came out of that forum the other week was that, you know, we need to, as a sector, have confidence in ourselves that we know our students, we know our universities, and we really know the ways that, you know, can kind of motivate those students into action and help them with their sort of career development. And having that confidence that we can act as really great ambassadors for our students when it comes to working with those employers. So I do think, you know, there's lots of resource challenges. Everything we've talked about around accessibility and sort of, I guess, equal access to employer engagement fits in to this particular discussion, but reimagining what we can offer. And I think having that confidence is really crucial. You know, some professions, some services have literally one person working on employer engagement for the entire service. But just thinking at that level, you know, what can you offer that is a really fantastic sort of service to an employer in terms of value added, but at the same time to our students. So, I mean, the picture is very different sort of across the sector, but I'm pretty inspired, I think, that when it comes to autumn term, you know, there will be really brilliant careers fairs, there will be brilliant events that are sort of planned online or blended, but I'm really interested to see how placements, internships, that consultancy side develops.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's certainly speeding up innovation, isn't it, as you mentioned, but within that, there's a lot of stuff that still needs to be done. And I think to lead back, I guess, to a conversation that happened earlier in the podcast, talking about the tech capability and particularly remote working, and something we've all had to adapt to. And of course, you know, assuming that it would be easy enough for a student, you know, placement student or a graduate to adapt to it is, yeah, probably a bit of a stretch. So I think, you know, that idea of that kind of preloading of support as well, I think, you know, as you've all mentioned, is really, really important. And Becci, I think you've just got one other point to add on this as well.
Yeah, it's just to say with the employer engagement as well, it's quite different for your large employers that are kind of set up to work in a more virtual environment. They've got the tech behind it. They maybe have doing a lot of online recruitment and onboarding anyway. I think universities can play a really important role with the SMEs who perhaps need a bit of guidance of, how might I run a virtual internship and how might I onboard a new graduate in a virtual environment. And I think some universities, and I know we are very much looking at not just how the employers can support us with our fairs and in curriculum, but how can we support them with helping them navigate this new landscape as well.
Yeah, no, totally agree. And I think it all kind of ties in, doesn't it, to that civic university network and the idea of, really universities having to lead the way, not just to kind of demonstrate the value during the current period, but also because, we're such a key part of all of our local areas, key employer and a key, I guess, agent of change in local areas as well. So yeah, some really, really good points.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, moving on to our final discussion topic then. We'd like to end things on a bit of a positive note here. So we've kind of spoken a lot, and it's all over the media at the moment. There's a lot of research going on at the moment to say that the graduate labour market is not the best it's ever been. It's quite a difficult time for our graduating class of 2020 and more than likely 2021 as well. But what I'd like to kind of just highlight is the good news stories, so those positive news stories, so things that are still happening for our students and soon to be graduates that are really showing that they are thriving, they're having positive outcomes. So we've got quite a few things happening here at Sheffield Hallam, but I wondered what's going on at your universities as well that really does show that students are thriving in this quite tough economic climate.
Yeah, so I mean, I said earlier that I've not been at Exeter for very long, but I've been really impressed at some of the kind of whole university responses, so kind of very joined up thinking. So one of the things that's in progress at the moment is a really large scale project to move as much teaching as is necessary, or to be prepared to teach everything online if it comes to that, as I'm sure every other university is doing. But the way it's happening at Exeter is 130 internships have been created. So 30 of them are for new graduates and 100 of them are for current students. And they're all paid, they're a year long, and they are all virtual. And what they are designed to do is to provide kind of ongoing feedback to academics and learning designers about the content of the teaching resources that are being created. So, as new modules are kind of evolving, they're getting live feedback from these interns who are gaining kind of really great experience at working with academics, giving their thoughts about the kind of content of their learning. And the university, as a result of that, is getting some really high quality kind of teaching resources that are going to, feel valued by students, which I think it's just a really important move on so many levels. It's kind of tackling the issue of a reduction in opportunities for both students and graduates, but also kind of trying to create some confidence around the move from face-to-face learning to online, fully online or blended, to give students a bit of reassurance that, their kind of student fees are going to be going towards what will be a quality learning experience. So, I'm just very impressed that the university have done that, kind of in collaboration with the Careers Service. But it's kind of a really nice university-wide response, I think, to a number of key issues whilst keeping students at the centre.
Absolutely, that sounds absolutely brilliant. Becci, is anything going off at Nottingham Trent? Any positive news stories from students, graduates?
Yeah, definitely. We've got so next week we've got 85 students taking part in our yearly Grads for Nottingham 2-week work experience challenge. So usually they go out to the organisation, then they come back and do a presentation, and it's a really kind of quite transformational work experience challenge that they do. But we've had a really great response from employers to move this virtually, and we've still had lots of students and graduates apply for it. So that's taking place next week. But also we had a graduate internship program running during lockdown. It started in the start of March, and actually the vast majority of those internships did continue. The employers found new innovative ways for the graduates to work from home or work remotely, and the graduates responded really well to that as well. So it goes to show that employers are really looking at different ways to adapt, and that graduates are very adaptable themselves as well. And then locally, we know things like our local council's graduate scheme is going ahead, which is fantastic. And we know lots of employers are still recruiting, or they're just taking a bit of a pause while they think how to do it, and there will be jobs coming up in the future. So any recent graduates and final year students, the real message is keep looking and engage with the career service, because there's definitely opportunities out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've got some really positive stories here at Hallam. So we've just launched paid internships as well here at Hallam. So that's got a lot of press that's gone out this week as well. And our enterprise team are doing some absolutely cracking work at the moment. A lot of students, so second year students and final year students who are thinking of setting up their own business during this time, the enterprise team is offering an amazing amount of support, and it's been really well received. I think a lot of students, because the external environment is so uncertain, they're looking at what the internal environment here at Hallam is offering to give them that certainty. And it's really positive stuff to hear, definitely. Yeah. Matthew, is anything positive? Hopefully something's positive happening at Lancaster.
Yeah, definitely. Well, some very similar sort of trends coming out of Lancaster as well. Obviously, Helen, you mentioned about entrepreneurship, and we do have a really fantastic enterprise team here at Lancaster as well. And they're doing a program called Bouncing Forward from a Pandemic, where they're bringing quite a lot of entrepreneurs in to speak with students and to work on business plans and ideas. And, you know, definitely always inspired by the creativity of our students when it comes to coming up with a business plan or finding a gap in the market. There is a big focus at Lancaster around health innovation, and we're just building, or have been building, due to complete a health innovation campus. So that's really captured a lot of students' imagination, and there have been students who've been working on projects around PPE and other things as well. So, you know, really seeing that obviously the reality of the crisis and trying to find ways to you know, react positively to that has always been really fantastic. And, you know, in the local area too, we do have internships available. There's a program called Ingenie, which focuses specifically on kind of the manufacturing sector in Lancashire. And we do offer 8-week internships over the summer to students who can really add value to some SMEs as they're trying to get back on their feet, I guess, over the summer period. So, you know, some very positive news coming out of Lancaster. And building on what Becci said, you know, there's lots of uncertainty. There's you know, lots of doom and gloom sometimes around recruitment. But I do think that there are lots of opportunities available to students coming out. And, you know, just in the last week, there is a student at Lancaster that for the last 10 months has been trying to find a placement, and, you know, he's had every knockback possible, but he's managed to get a role at Sony down in London, and I think surprised himself and everyone else. And, you know, it's just amazing what you can achieve with that dedication. And, you know, it might not have necessarily been, you know, what he aimed for all those months ago, but, you know, adapting and sort of, you know, doing the best he could. Honestly, really inspiring to hear that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm just going to say as well, I mean, we've had quite a lot of success with our product design students. They're doing quite well in sourcing placements. Everybody else is kind of struggling in the department that I work in, but product design, they're doing quite well. And like I say, they've shocked us, and they've probably shocked themselves that they've managed to bag these. But yeah, it's really positive to hear. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting about all of those things that you've reflected there is that, you know, we talk for ages and ages, I think, you know, over the last kind of 5-10 years plus about resilience and adaptability, and not just in kind of HE, but in schools and colleges. And, you know, often it's been, well, how do you teach those skills? And we've finally been presented with a situation where, you know, it's happening in real time. Nobody would have wanted it, but it is. And totally agree with what you're saying there, Matt. You know, we've had placement students who've totally had to change their plans. They had a placement, it's been taken away, but actually the employers offered, you know, we'll help you with your dissertation and we'll offer you a graduate internship at the end of it if we've got capacity to. So, you know, I think people are getting used to kind of pivoting a bit more. So that's really nice to see. And I think one of the main things really to take away from everything that all three of you have said today is just how heavily embedded and important universities are within the local areas that you operate in, both in terms of the kind of employer side and kind of connecting graduates and students to employers,
but also in terms of that civic agenda as well. You know, as you mentioned, Matt, you know, contributing to making PPE, you know, local SME sectors, and I'm sure it's the same, you know, whatever area we're in. So a lot in the press at the moment about the value of HE. A tweet from a Conservative politician I won't mention that was on Twitter yesterday, which I think led to quite a serious sort of debate and Twitter thread. But really, you know, this hopefully kind of gives a clear indication of where that value's added, and hopefully kind of contributes to that more positive discourse around universities as well. So thank you to all of you for appearing on the podcast today. It's been great having you on. For anybody listening at home, we're going to put links to kind of the articles or things that we've mentioned in the episode notes. If you want to have a read through everything, do have a look at the universities we've had on today and see some of the great work that their careers teams are doing. And if you've got any questions, as usual, get in touch with Helen or I. But finally, I guess just from Helen and I, thanks very much for being on today, and I hope you'll enjoy the weather while it lasts.
If you've been interested in anything that we've talked about on today's podcast, do get in touch with us via the comment threads on the podcast link, wherever you're listening. We'll be tuning in again next week with a guest soon to be announced. And each week when we announce the guest, we'll be giving you a chance to put questions to the special guest in advance of the podcast. Thanks for tuning in and listening to us here on The New Normal.